part 2 of chapter 3, we're still discussing the human body and the systems, and we're going to move on to the circulatory system. And the circulatory system involves the blood, heart, and blood vessels. When we look at the heart, we have to think of the heart as a pump. It pumps blood through the vessels. It is about the size of a fist, and it's located in the left center of the chest. So take a look at these diagrams and just kind of see what the various parts of the heart are, because it's important to understand them. Again, as this is just an introduction to the systems, you will be learning, if you're taking anatomy and physiology, you'll be learning much more about the structures and functions of the heart. The heart's divided by a wall that creates a right and left side of the heart, and also divided into compartments known as chambers. And these chambers, there are two of them above called the atrium, and then there are the atrium are above, the ventricles are below. So the two atria are above and the two ventricles are below as far as the chambers of the heart. During every contraction, the heart pumps blood. Now this blood is not oxygenated. It's high in carbon dioxide. So from the right ventricle, that blood filled with carbon dioxide gets pumped to the lungs so that oxygen-rich blood can then return to the left atrium from the lungs. So you pump that blood to the lungs to get oxygenated, and then it goes back into the left atrium, and then the left ventricle will push that oxygen-rich blood out of the heart to the rest of the body, and then the right atrium will receive the oxygen pour, or the blood that's high in carbon dioxide, and the cycle begins again. So it really is just a cycle that occurs with each contraction to make sure that poorly oxygenated blood receives oxygen, returns to the heart, and it gets distributed through the body to all the cells, organs, and systems. There are various blood vessels, arteries. They carry blood away from the heart. They are elastic, muscular tubes, and they begin at the heart as two large vessels known as the pulmonary artery and the aorta. The pulmonary artery carries blood to the lungs so that it can get oxygenated, and the aorta takes the oxygenated blood that has been returned to the heart and delivers it to the rest of the body, and it divides out into capillaries. Capillaries are where the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide occur. And they are a network of very, very fine, they're very fine vessels, very, very tiny, much smaller than arteries and veins. And this is, as I said, is where this exchange of carbon and dioxide and oxygen occur, and also where you can get rid of waste into the bloodstream. Veins are vessels that get larger and larger. They form major trunks that empty blood returning into the right atrium. So remember that blood going into the right atrium does not have the oxygen. It's not oxygen rich, so it needs to go back to the heart. So the veins carry the blood back to the heart to get oxygenated via the lungs. And here's a picture showing you the different types of vessels we just discussed. You can see that arteries are red as they're rich in oxygen, and the veins are depicted in blue as they are not oxygenated and more carbon dioxide. And you can see the capillaries, a very, very, very small network that bring together or bridge the gap between the arteries and the veins so that exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide and wastes can occur. A pulse is something that occurs every time there's a surge of blood when the heart contracts. It can be felt in many different parts on the body and wherever an artery is close to the surface of the skin. If an artery is cut, blood will spurt. If a vein is cut, blood will flow. So if you see blood spewing really fast, spurting out of the body, you know an artery has been cut. There are different locations for feeling pulses, and you need to know all of these, because if you're needing to check a pulse, there are so many parts of the body that you can do that. One is a carotid artery found in the neck, the femoral artery in the groin, radial artery in the wrist, the brachial artery in the arm, the posterior tibial artery on the inside of the ankle, and the dorsalis pedis artery on top of the foot. You want to become familiar with all of these arteries. Test them on yourself. Try them on somebody else. Blood pressure is the amount of pressure that's exerted by the blood on the walls of the arteries. So blood pressure is another thing that's very important to learn how to take. And in anatomy and physiology courses, you will be learning how to take blood pressure. We'll be touching on it in this course as well. The blood itself, there are different portions of the blood you should be familiar with. The solid portion actually has the cells, like the red and white blood cells and the platelets. The red blood cells are what carry oxygen. So when somebody is deficient in red blood cells and they don't have enough, they're not getting enough oxygen throughout the body. So somebody might be anemic and they have a low red blood cell count. They may feel more tired, out of breath more, because they're not getting enough oxygen carried throughout the blood. White blood cells help defend against infection. So if your white blood cell count is high, that could be a sign that you have an infection. We need platelets, essential for clotting blood. Sometimes platelets can be too many and blood can clot too much. There are blood thinners for that. There's also a baby aspirin that can be administered to help with keeping the blood flowing and not clotting. The liquid portion of the blood is known as plasma. It's mainly water, and it carries food materials and waste materials. And then one other thing you need to understand is when there's not good blood circulation, a person can go into shock. This is called hypoperfusion. Signs and symptoms would be that they're pale or turning blue, their skin is clammy and cold, they may have a very fast pulse and breathing rate, they're restless, anxious, may have nausea and vomiting, they have low blood pressure, volume, and temperature. So that is it for understanding the circulatory system. In the next video, we'll get into the nervous system.